What's good, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Daily Fantasy Knockout Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Stillman. I'm riding solo this week after my partner, Drew, is AWOL for the week. So I'm putting this out just so that you can still get your fix of daily fantasy MMA knowledge for this weekend's breakdown of UFC Fight Night 86 between Ben Rothwell and Junior dos Santos clash. So I put out a blog post on Roto Grinders this evening. The fights are Sunday afternoon. And so if you don't feel like reading that whole long article, which I hope you do, but if you don't have time between now and the fights to get that in, then I have your audio version of it right here. So trying to keep putting out that content for our new podcast, which you can find on whatever your preferred podcast app is, or on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn. We've been approved for all of those, so check us out there. And hopefully we'll be back next week, the two of us, to do our usual thing. But in the meantime, let's get to the fights for Sunday in Croatia. Okay, so our first one, our headliner, is between Ben Rothwell and Junior dos Santos. The surging Rothwell finds himself in the unlikely position of contender in the heavyweight division, and with the win over dos Santos, he could find himself in a title fight in the near future. The King of Kenosha has won 4 straight, all via stoppage, since getting guillotined by Rothwell is absolutely massive, even for the heavyweight division. He has a big-time power in both hands, but since this is true of many heavyweights, what has set Rothwell apart is his iron chin. Not particularly fleet of foot or adept at cutting off the cage, Rothwell will stalk forward into range again and again. He can be hard to hit cleanly because his movement can be very awkward. He will alternate between holding his hands low and using his lead hand to try to corral his opponent or bat down their lead hand. If his opponent stays on his bike and circles away, Rothwell will simply follow. Whenever the opponent decides to engage, Rothwell will often just eat the incoming shots for the chance to hit his own. And since he usually has the power advantage and doesn't seem to get hurt, this strategy has been working for him. In his knockout of Overeem, Rothwell did slip a straight left from the ream and came over the top with his outstretched left arm with a right hook behind the ear that put down the hulking Dutchman. Rothwell has won most of his victory, but has recently shown off a modified guillotine choke of his own called a go-go choke that has proven just about unstoppable once he gets the grip on an opponent's neck. What has allowed him to set this choke up is his defensive wrestling. Against both Barnett and Mitrione, he was able to grab a hold of their necks after stuffing a takedown attempt. Despite an average of 1 takedown landed per 15 minutes, Rothwell hasn't hit a takedown of his own since taking down Gilbert Ivol 5 times in their bout 6 years ago. The average is more a function of the fact that Rothwell's fights typically don't last very long, so his takedown average is not going down as quickly as it would if you were winning his fights by decision. Rothwell generally doesn't prefer to fight in the clinch, really only doing so if he has his man hurt or if he gets put there himself. If he can back his opponent up to the fence, he'll often throw an uppercut before grabbing the tie plum. Opponents will sometimes duck their head to avoid his himself in a bit of a rough patch, though, having lost 3 of 5 since defending his championship for the only time against Frank Mir 4 years ago. 2 of those losses came in one-sided beatdowns at the hands of Cain Velasquez, and I've seen it suggested that dos Santos is not the same man he was prior to those shellackings. It is certainly possible that the wear on his body has sapped some of his athleticism or hurt his ability to take a shot, and his recent knockout loss to Overeem certainly would not help in that department, but I've not seen any evidence yet to suggest this to be true. It took Velasquez more than 22 minutes of constantly smashing dos Santos to finally put him away, and the stoppage against Overeem may have been premature as he was getting to his feet at the time of the stoppage, instantly protested, and did not look staggered as he walked around the immediate aftermath. The things that gave him problems were relentless pace and constantly having to defend takedowns against Velasquez and long-range kicks that kept him on the outside in the case of Overeem, who eventually put him down with a lunging left hook. Sagano is still an exceptionally athletic heavyweight and one of the best boxers in MMA. He has very fast hands and pretty solid defense. He generally keeps his hands up high, moves his head well, and exhibits good lateral movement. But the last of these, especially the lateral movement, starts to become less effective when he gets tired too easily. And that was his downfall against Velasquez. While he was able to escape early on, he gradually slowed down to the point that he could no longer escape. He mostly looks to go upstairs with his punches, but will also work the body with single shots, especially if the fight gets out of the first 2 rounds. The Brazilian does a nice job of throwing in combination, as one would expect such an excellent boxer. His right is definitely his power hand, and he has a famously vicious uppercut and overhand with it. He generally doesn't kick much, but will throw occasional leg and high kicks. In recent fights, he has also shown a wheel kick, knocking out Hunt with it and throwing it, but failing to land it against Overeem. Dos Santos is stout, and he has also shown a pretty solid offensive wrestling skills at times, but seeing him shoot is a pretty rare occurrence. Zingano is not much of a clinch fighter and will usually look to disengage if he has the inside position along the cage. This is a very close fight, and I think it would be a mistake to count out either guy. A few years ago, Dos Santos would have been the runaway favorite, much like Overeem was against Rothwell. He is faster, more athletic, and has the superior technique. Rothwell looks to pressure, but is not at the level of Velasquez in that area, so Dos Santos should not have issues with his cardio. When he can dictate the pace, he's able to maintain or even increase his output as the fight wears on. He should be able to put hands on Rothwell consistently, who doesn't have the long-range game or wrestling to stifle the Brazilian's offense. As Rothwell has shown, though, it only takes one, and given how durable he is, I expect him to be able to stick around deep into the fight, giving him ample opportunity to land one of his sledgehammer rights. I've gone back and forth in this one a few times, but I think the concerns about Zingano's chin are premature. He has to survive a few scary moments, but Dos Santos consistently outlands, but Dos Santos lands a game-changing blow of his own for TKO victory in the third. In terms of daily fantasy, Rothwell and Dos Santos are both 9,700 on DraftKings, and Dos Santos, as of right now, is a slight favorite, minus 125. Obviously, it's pretty clear. This one, along with the other heavyweight fights, you can't really touch it in cash. Either one of these guys can get roasted in the first round, but both are obviously playing tournaments with that kind of finishing potential. I can't imagine this fight lasting 5 rounds, but if by some miracle it does, Dos Santos is likely to come out on top with his superior volume. Rothwell probably possesses greater one-punch knockout, is faster, and has a more diverse attack. If he were to land the wheel kick on Rothwell that he took out Hunt with, instead of grazing off the top of his head, it would connect flush with Rothwell's chin, and that shot would take out an elephant. Basically, either guy is capable of ending this fight at any time. As the main event, this fight will be highly owned, so maybe rather than trying to figure out who lands first, you want to go with some of the other heavyweight fights that have more defined favorites, in my opinion. That brings us to our co-main event between Derek Lewis and Gabriel Gonzaga. Derek the Black Beast Lewis is riding a bit of momentum himself, coming off back-to-back stoppage victories, and will look to vault into the heavyweight top 15 with a win over Gonzaga. All of Lewis's UFC fights have ended inside the distance, so despite Gonzaga's last god-awful offering against Konstantin Orokin, it's hard to envision this fight seeing the final bell. Lewis is aggressive and extremely powerful, and though he is improving slowly, he is unrefined in many areas. His power on the feet needs to be respected and wobble anybody's rush attempts to push the fight into the clinch. Lewis will throw head kicks, but he doesn't set them up with his punches, so they really land with full force. He closes the distance with a lunging left hook, and if his opponent will oblige him in the pocket, he'll throw haymakers with both hands, leaving things like defense to lesser men. In the clinch, Lewis is not active with strikes, looking for takedowns instead. If the takedown isn't there, he will disengage and look to tee off on the clinch break. He uses various methods to get the fight to the floor, particularly single legs and outside trips in close. But he is not a technical wrestler, relying instead on his ridiculous strength to power foes to the mat. Top position is Lewis' wheelhouse going away. His ground and pound is truly frightening. It only takes one of his hammer fists to turn out the lights on anybody unlucky enough to find themselves trapped beneath his massive frame. In fact, all of Lewis's UFC wins have ended via ground and pound induced TKO. He is not much of a threat in other areas. From defensive grappling standpoint, he does have a good sprawl on double legs, but if opponents can stick with a takedown attempt or chain them together, his defensive wrestling is definitely not impenetrable. When an opponent gets in on his hips, Lewis usually finds himself on his back. From there, he doesn't have much to offer. He'll look to explode up occasionally or stall more frequently. And what could prove deadly against a grappler of Gonzaga's caliber is Lewis's tendency to give up his because he tries to give up. Now is another of the heavyweight old guard, been around the UFC. You know about his elite grappling pedigree. Gonzaga's biggest problem when he does throw combinations, his left is often a throwaway rangefinder before he uncorks another. He can get gun shy, going through long periods of inactivity. His lack of diversity against more technical strikers, but I don't think that category. In the clinch, Gonzaga is not particularly active with strikes. He will need the legs and body, but he's mostly looking to either score points, quote unquote, by mashing his opponent into the fence or work takedowns. Gonzaga's wrestling is solid, and he is very effective against inexperienced wrestlers. His single leg is a particular weapon, as well as trips from the body lock. He can be tenacious when he has hold of his opponent. Defensively, Gonzaga likes to dissuade takedown attempts with guillotines. The fear is that he has fallen off after losing 3 of 4, but I think Gonzaga has advantages in just about every area. Lewis is very strong, and while in the past he has weighed in about 20 pounds more than the Brazilian, Gonzaga actually weighed in around the 260 mark as well. Lewis actually has to cut weight to make the 265 limit. So at the weigh-ins, Gonzaga was like 260 and Lewis is 264. So he won't have the size advantage. I guess Gonzaga's been bulking up. I didn't think that he looked fat or out of shape necessarily. So I guess he's been packing on the muscle. We'll see how that plays out for him. Gonzaga's a better and more dangerous striker. He should also have the wrestling advantage, and he'll be worlds better on the ground. The only place he can find himself in trouble is if he decides to play guard, if he winds up on the bottom. But with Lewis's bad habit of giving up his back and scrambles to get to his feet, Gonzaga choke pretty easily. Gonzaga by first-round submission is the pick. So Louis, a slight favorite here at -135. He's priced, but he's priced at 9,100 on DraftKings. Gonzaga, conversely, is +1. It's priced at 10.3K on DraftKings. So Lewis is the biggest favorite here, but I think the prices more appropriately value these fighters. As none of Lewis's fights have seen the judges in the UFC, you can't feel great about, obviously, either one of these guys in cash. I'm pretty confident in Gonzaga, though, but just saying that gives me the willies. He should be able to get it done, but he is so inconsistent, you can't feel great about having him in a cash lineup. This is another tournament play for both guys, but I side with Gonzaga, who has many more ways to win. So just a quick one on the next one. We have another heavyweight fight, our third heavyweight fight of 5 on the evening, between Francis Ngannou and Curtis Blaydes. The Frenchman, specimen with dynamite in his fists. He showed some serious flaws in his defensive wrestling, however, against Luis Henrique. Henrique was a member of the Brazilian wrestling team, but Blaydes is a better athlete and wrestler, so this could be a real issue for Ngannou. Blaydes is only 25, which is adolescent for the heavyweight division, and thus should be making significant between fights. Ngannou is another rare under 30 UFC big man, and I don't think his takedown defense will have come far enough along to keep Blaydes at bay. Anytime this is spent on the feet, Blaydes will be in danger, though. But I like Razor Blaydes to not play around on the feet and get the fight to the mat post-haste. From there, he rides out a decision or earns a late stoppage on the worn-out Ngannou. From DFS for DraftKings, Ngannou is 9,800 at +130, and Blaydes price fighter at 9,600 and is actually favored at -140. Ngannou has the superior upside with his knockout power and like ridiculous, just ridiculous power. So I think he might make the better tournament play. The game may need time to become truly dangerous, but he has a very clear path to victory, and it's one I like him to implement. Next up is the next heavyweight fight between the debuting Era and against Timothy Johnson. The first bout of the heavyweight main course pits newcomer Tybura against the mustachioed Tim Johnson. Disclosure up front, I wasn't able to find Tybura's M1 Global fights online, and that is where his last 8 fights have taken place. Tybura is primarily a kickboxer, and an offensively solid one at that. The pole utilizes stinging leg kicks, teeps, and head kicks as his main weapons, but he does not seem comfortable under fire. He throws back hooks to try to get his tormentor away from him, or he throws his hands up and flinches away. Tybura has good cardio and can maintain a high output when he can keep his preferred kicks without having to worry about getting countered. The M1 veteran is a reasonably strong grappler. He likes to catch kicks and then dump his foe to the mat, as well as hit trips from the body lock. Tybura also has good instincts for reactive takedowns. When the mood strikes, and he decides he wants to fight on the canvas, a habit of shooting from too far away with his head down. With 6 submission victories to his credit, Tybura is a credible grappler, but he definitely prefers top position. He doesn't offer much from his back, mostly looking to control posture. And for a heavyweight, Tybura's ground and pound is not especially lethal, using it instead to set up submissions. Raise that pedigree into a reliable grappling game for MMA. He lost a close decision to resident wrestle-only heavyweight department. Despite his credentials, Johnson does not typically shoot for singles or doubles, preferring to work takedowns from the clinch, where he is he looks for the side, defensive on the inside, adept at hitting uppercuts, elbows, and knees on his trapped opponent. Once on top, Johnson is very heavy. He's a slick guard. Against Abdurakhimov, he passed him out almost as soon as he hit his takedown. Once in a dominant position, he will unleash brutal ground and pound. On the feet, the southpaw has pretty deep speed, means he still gets hit a fair amount. He mostly loads up on big single shots or wings haymaker hook combinations, which could leave him open for someone savvy at slipping and ripping. He has big power in his punches and can eat a good shot too, though. Johnson also has a bad habit of ducking his head down to avoid punches, a trait Tybura will look to exploit. The pole will sometimes up and ducking into it. Tybura will have the advantage in terms of technique on the feet, but I think Johnson will be able to walk through most of it to put the Russian on the canvas. Tybura would win a straight kickboxing match, no doubt, but Johnson is a big, strong wrestler who comes forward, and I don't think Tybura has the slip and rip ability or the lateral movement to stand off the American's wheelhouse. Johnson grinds out a decision. From a DFS perspective, Tybura is 9,500. The lower price fighter again and again. He's favored at -140. Johnson is 9,900 and is at +130 on the Vegas line. Like the co-main event, I think the prices are more accurate than the line. So I prefer Johnson, obviously, since I picked him. Out of all the heavyweights on the card, I think I like Johnson the best for cash. But as you know by now, heavyweight MMA, etc., both are viable in GPPs. If Johnson can get top position, he can make short work of the pole. If Tybura can stay on his bike and counter the winging punches of Johnson, short order. As I said, though, I don't think Tybura is an unbelievable counter striker, nor does he possess the lateral movement to make this strategy a viable one. Next up, we've got the former KSW champion, Blachowicz is a low-volume kickboxer who likes to outfight. In his 2 UFC losses, though, he was out-wrestled by Corey Anderson and pressured to the fence by the harder-hitting Jimmy Manoa. Blachowicz lost that latter fight despite just barely outlanding the Brit. Despite his background and his body kick knockout of Ilir Latifi, the pole doesn't pack much of a wallop. He takes on the Duke, who does a little bit of everything but isn't outstanding at any one thing. He likes to make the fight dirty and tries to exploit the weaknesses of his opponent with his well-roundedness. Without the wrestling of Anderson or the power and footwork of Manoa, he'll have a tough time implementing such a strategy, though. Blachowicz wins by decision. Pekrajic is 8,800 on DraftKings and is at +310, and Blachowicz is at 10,600 and -340 on DraftKings. With all the finishers on the card, I'm not really interested in Blachowicz as price. Pekrajic has not had any success against UFC caliber opposition in quite some time, so I have little confidence in him either. Still, fighting in his hometown as one of the only 2 Croats on the card may have its advantages. Vegas has this fight pegged at over 1.5 rounds, so they expect a finish to materialize in the later rounds, but I probably won't be capitalizing on it. On the main card is between strawweights, Marina Moroz and Christina Stanciu. The Iron Lady Moroz burst onto the scene last April with a first-round armbar victory over the highly regarded Joanne Calderwood. The Ukrainian has extensive boxing kick, changing in the pocket, and put a serious beating on Calderwood before getting the submission. Her high-volume attack is not confined to just her hands, as she throws plenty of kicks both low and high. While she is technically superior to most of her opponents as a kickboxer, she does have some bad defensive habits. She often stands right in front of her foe after throwing a combination, leaving herself open to counters. This is exacerbated by her spotty head movement and her tendency to not bring her hands back up to high guard after throwing. Still, few women in the division can match her output, diversity, aggression, and power standing. Despite her striking pedigree, most of Moroz's wins have come by submission, so she is a real threat on the ground. As previously mentioned, she jumped guard to snatch the armbar on. This is an option if she has her prey hurt in close quarters. But I've not seen much of an offensive wrestling game. It seems she is typically able to get her submissions going when her opponent shoots in on her. This is reminiscent of the Diaz brothers, who grab submissions after hurt opponents have had enough on the feet. She is very aggressive from her back, with both strikes and submission attempts. Stanciu comes from a wushu background, so striking is her forte as well. She can be extremely aggressive at times, especially when she can corner her opponent into the cage. To facilitate this, she has a fondness for front kicks to the body, to the cage. At range, she will throw leg kicks frequently along with her teeps, but in the pockets where she uncorks left-right hook combinations until her get away or falls down. On the inside, Stanciu has respectable head movement, but she tends to get tagged as she charges forward. When that happens, she hesitates for a brief second before resuming her assault. This shows that she has a solid chin, but she is not great at slipping punches. And her ever-present aggression renders her striking arsenal more limited than it should be, given her background. In the clinch or on the mat, Stanciu has a bad habit of letting her offense stymied. If she can posture up, she'll unload with hook-laden ground and pound, but just as she does in the pocket. She's not as slick a grappler as Moroz, despite the similar number of submission victories. Moroz is the favorite here, which is reasonable to me. She's the more technical striker and grappler and is dangerous in both areas. Stanciu is aggressive and will probably have her moments, given how Moroz tends to get hit quite a bit. But she showed an excellent ability to recover against Latorno, so I don't expect Stanciu to be able to put Moroz to sleep standing. After some feet, the fight will hit in the mat at some point, where Moroz will lock on one of her trademark armbars. Moroz is 11,200 minus 170, and staying dollars on DraftKings, and is only plus 160. With the new DraftKings algorithms of an emphasis on odds, we have the second card as less than a 2-to-1 favorite. Still, Moroz is worth some plays, even on this heavyweight-laden card. Calderwood, a much better fighter than Stanciu, that she's capable of getting her opponent out of there early. Stanciu's aggression and experience against high-level opposition should play into the Iron Lady's hands. Stanciu is a better play than the other dirt cheap option. If you want to go dumpster diving and leave a ton of salary, Moroz should oblige Stanciu on the feet and is quite hittable. Stanciu is coming down from 125, so what she lacks in technique, she makes up for in power and aggression. The featured prelim is between welterweights Nicholas Dalby and Zach Cummings. Cummings might not be scaring a lot of people, but it's not an accident he's 3-1 in one of the best divisions in the sport, with his only loss coming to Uber prospect and YouTube sensation Gunnar Nelson. Cummings has plus skills in just about every phase and can finish the fight standing or on the mat. Dalby is as game as they come, but he doesn't have the finishing potential of the American. If given the chance, he'll crack on the feet, and he doesn't mind taking some punishment to dish out his own. But I like I like Cummings to hand the Dane his first loss. Dalby is $9,000 on DraftKings, but is minus 120, so he's a good value if you want to follow the Vegas lines. Cummings comes in at $10,400 and is plus 110. This fight is one of the most likely to go the distance according to Vegas. And for that reason, and as a slight favorite, Dalby is a cash game play at only 9,000. If he's that cheap and the fight's supposed to go the distance, and he's a really high output striker, you could definitely do worse for a low price cash option. And a bit of curious matchmaking, established and veteran Taisumov is paired with UFC debutant Hadzovic at 155. Bekin is well-rounded with plus skills in all areas. His high-volume striking features kicks at all levels, really good hands, and excellent footwork. His defense is solid as well, always keeping his hands up. The Chechen is no slouch in the wrestling department either for react kicks. He has good double and single legs as well as skills as a judoka. The Tiger Muay Thai expert has an active top game with both strikes and submissions. In all, Taisumov is talented, even by the standards of the division, looking to continue his climb into the top 15. Hadzovic, besides having an awesome nickname, is not without skill himself, especially on the feet. Probably his best attribute is his obvious natural power. He doesn't need a lot of space or very many shots to turn out someone's lights. He's especially dangerous with knees in close quarters. As opponents look to duck out of the way, Hadzovic can launch devastating knees very quickly, catching knocked out UFC. Still, while he's moving better on the feet of late, plotting less than he used to, he has started bouncing on both feet simultaneously, which limits his ability to react and move quickly. You can't pivot and change direction quickly if both your feet are off the ground. He also has a tendency to charge in without moving his head, a trait that could cost him against a seasoned counter-striker. Hadzovic is decent, but definitely less imposing in the wrestling and grappling departments. When the mood strikes, he will pursue the takedown tenaciously, but he relies more on that tenacity than technique to get his foe to the ground. And on top, he is definitely more of a grinder than a slick grappler or dangerous ground and pound threat. He does boast solid takedown defense, however. Taisumov is better all around, though. He's a more diverse striker, a better wrestler, and a superior grappler. Average 155er, and Hadzovic has the look of a lower tier UFC fighter. Merbek should get the finish inside 2 rounds. Taisumov is the most expensive fighter on the card at $11,400, and he's the biggest favorite at -330. Hadzovic is comes in at $8,000 and is +300. Taisumov is about the only guy I would feel confident playing in cash. I'll have a lot of exposure to him since there are lots of mid-price options to fit in around him. I'll probably fade Hadzovic. There are plenty of other guys with a puncher's chance that have much better odds than he does. Next up is a bantamweight bout between Ian Entwistle and Alejandro Perez. Entwistle's modus operandi is to roll for a leg lock at the first opportunity. It goes one of 2 ways. Either he gets it, see Anthony Burchak, or he gets smashed as he uses both arms to try to get the submission, leaving his head exposed to his topside opponent, see Daniel Hooker. This is game and decent in stand-up, but Entwistle's fights go only those 2 ways. This time he gets the tap most likely in the first. Entwistle is 9,300 on DraftKings despite coming in at -145, and Perez is at 10,100 despite being the +125. So I'm fading Perez. With favorite odds at this price and with tons of upside, you gotta like Entwistle. I'll definitely have him in some lineups. The next fight is another bantamweight bout. This one between Damian Stasiak and Filip Pejic. Polish grappler Stasiak drops down to 135 for his sophomore UFC appearance after getting out-muscled on the mat by wrestler Yalcin Made. He takes zone UFC newcomer Pejic in a classic striker versus grappler matchup. Anik and Stan mentioned on the broadcast of Stasiak's first fight that he comes from a traditional martial arts background, but I haven't found exactly what that is. Watching his fighting style, I would say Taekwondo is a striking base, but Webster is definitely more comfortable mixing it up on the canvas. He throws mostly ineffectual spinning back kicks and is a bit stilted with his movement on the feet. When throwing punches, he is there to be countered, and when his opponent is connecting, Stasiak seems to freeze up. He is much more effective on the mat, and he is adept at turning his fights into those kinds of battles. His offensive wrestling is nothing to write home about, but he has good level changes for reactive takedowns, and he has shown an affinity for turning caught kicks. His takedown defense is pretty poor, but that might be a function of his wanting to fight on the ground at all costs, so he doesn't mind playing off his back. He often uses the threat of a guillotine to either stave off the attempt or turn it into a reversal. In fact, if there's one problem with his grappling style, it's that he can be too content to play off his back. He goes for the front headlock quite often, but has not shown himself to be very good at the job. But his submission defense is very good. He was caught in a few tricky spots against Meza and worked himself through fine. So as long as the fight is on the floor, his opponent will be at risk, but may be able to ride out the round in top position if they have sound submission defense of their own. Pejic is a striker with enough skill in other areas to not get completely overwhelmed if the fight isn't in his wheelhouse, but that's about it. Like Hadjovic, Pejic has good natural power, and his ground and pound is lethal when he leads. He is often one and done, throwing a kick or an overhand combos when countering. He bounces around on the very edge of range, feinting to try to draw out his opponent's strikes, and when they take the bait, he'll rip off 3 to 5 punch combinations. Pejic looks strong in the clinch and looks to knee off clinch breaks, but his wrestling leaves something to be desired. He doesn't offer much either offensively or defensively as a wrestler or grappler. He wants to get up when taken down, but doesn't look very adept at doing so. I'm going with the grappler in this particular throwback matchup. Pejic's takedown and grappling defense are suspect in my eyes, and Stasiak is very good at turning his fights into clinch, takedown, grappling battles. If the Pole plays around on the feet too much or is sloppy with his takedown entries, he could find himself staring, but I think grappling often enough to eventually earn a submission. Stasiak comes in at $10,000 and even $10,000 on DraftKings and is -120 favorite. Pejic comes in at $9,400 and is the +110 underdog in this close fight, according to Vegas. This fight is the third most likely to go the distance, according to Vegas. Pejic is high risk, high reward, but you can find guys around his price much more likely to finish early. I'm a bit tempted to play him in cash, as Stasiak is nearly at +500 to finish inside the distance. But despite that and his knockout potential, he could end up fending off submissions the entire fight. That, and I honestly have no idea how to play this card in cash. Next up are the featherweights, Lucas Martins and Robert Whiteford. Martins is a dangerous Muay Thai practitioner who wants as little to do with the ground game as possible. He has serious power, but has some defensive liabilities. He has solid takedown defense, but if planted on his back, he doesn't offer much. But he's had a rough go of it with upper echelon grapplers in Mirsad Bektik and Darren Elkins, so his stats don't bear out his true skills. Whiteford is a judoka who typically tries to use that background in reverse to throw hands. If he senses that he has a big advantage in the wrestling area and is playing with fire on the feet, he'll elect to tie up and work takedowns from the inside. It's crazy that the loser of this fight will be looking at a sub-500 UFC record and possibly a release as well. These are two talented featherweights. But I think it's Whiteford who finds himself on the chopping block. He doesn't have the same level of grappling that has given Martins problems, and the Brazilian will have the argument. Martins comes in at $10,200 and is the -120 favorite, and Whiteford comes in at $9,200 and is the +110 underdog. The Brazilian is much more likely to finish inside the distance, according to Vegas, but the fight is slightly favored to go over 2.5 rounds, so a finish is not especially likely. I think there are other fighters worth targeting more on this finish-heavy card. The second to last fight, or the second fight of the night, will be heavyweights. Jared, pronouncing his last name, Cannonier. Let's go with that. Jared Cannonier versus Cyril Asker. With the main card headed up by 4 heavyweight fights, it's interesting that the 5th battle on the Fight Pass prelims. Guess that Cannonier got thrown in against Sean Jordan in his debut, which is a rough way to get introduced to the big show. He was actually doing well before he got caught behind the ear and polished off on the ground. Not a massive heavyweight, the Killa Gorilla moves well and has good head movement at range. This can lapse at times in the pocket, where he sometimes gets caught standing straight up. He throws hard leg kicks and has power in his hands. Without seeing much of his wrestling, it's hard to gauge just how good it is, but he can hit high amplitude double legs on inexperienced foes, that much I know. As you would expect of the weight class, his ground and pound is nothing to play around with. And as with his wrestling, it's hard to tell how good the grappling is on his limited tape. He achieved mount very easily in the one non-UFC fight of his that I saw, but his hulking opponent was making his pro debut. Silverback Asker is a French native who's been fighting in the South African organization EFC that spawned Ruin Potts. Asker beat Potts after the latter returned to EFC after going winless in 3 Van Ziel by first-round guillotine to become that organization's champion. Based on how poorly Potts did during his UFC run, I don't really have, but he has a style tailored to succeed more often than Potts' grappling-centric approach. Granted, Asker is not going to make a run at the top 10 anytime soon, but his iron chin and willingness to trade bombs on the feet could net him a few UFC wins. Defense and head movement are mere afterthoughts for Asker, who wants to connect with as many overhands as possible and doesn't mind eating return fire to do it. He has a nice double leg, but it'll be interesting to see how that fares against better competition. He also has good grappling awareness and violent ground and pound. In all, Asker is an exciting, if athletically limited prospect who should be in some barn burners for as long as he's matched appropriately and can stick around the big show. I couldn't find much tape on Cannonier, but he looks like the bigger, better athlete. Asker throws hard and has a good chin, but his tendency to get hit flush makes it hard to pick him. He likes to wrestle and smash on dudes on the ground, but I think he has a hard time implementing that planning. Give me the Killer Gorilla by second round TKO. Cannonier comes in at $10,700 and is the minus 145 favorite. Asker is $8,700 and is the plus 135 dog. The Killer Gorilla is the third most expensive fighter on the card and the most expensive heavyweight. He's the highest favorite among the big boys, though only slightly. With all the finishing potential on this card, paying out for him should not be much of an issue. Under 1.5 rounds. Stay away in cash, but favor Cannonier in tournaments. Okay, this one is between the curtain jerker on the evening is between middleweights, Bojan and Alessio Di Chirico. Yeah, good luck pronouncing those names. I know that I'm probably butchering those, so I apologize on that account. But the Italian Di Chirico is the guy who's been fighting at middleweight, but he will somehow still be at a size disadvantage against the Serb Velikovic, who's coming up from welterweight. Serbian Steel Velikovic, there are so many good nicknames on this card. Serbian Steel is 6'2" and strapped. He trains out of a combination of Elevation Fight Team and American Top Team, and has already fought a few UFC veterans on the regional scene in the U.S. Though Di Chirico is undefeated, he's fighting guys I've never heard of for organizations I've never heard of either. Give me the bigger, more experienced, better trained fighter any day. Serbian Steel gets it done by TKO within the first 2 rounds. Velikovic comes in at $10,500 and is the minus 170 favorite on DraftKings. I'm sorry. He comes in at $10,500 on DraftKings and is the minus 170 favorite according to Vegas. Di Chirico is the plus 150. Underdog comes in at $8,900. Vegas disagrees with me as this fight is at minus 207 to go over 2.5 rounds. If you follow that, Velikovic isn't worth the price. But I think he's worth plays anyway because if you've been listening to this podcast, you know that we always give bonus picks at the end, so I'll get into those now. Drew and I usually do a lock, a live dog, a fight of the night, and a bathroom break fight of the night, as well as the Stonewall Stunner, our giant upset or highly unlikely pick. So far in our bonus pick section, we successfully picked. Well, I should say one of us successfully picked the following things. I picked Miesha Tate to beat Holly Holm. So, and on the same card, Drew picked Nate Diaz to beat Conor McGregor. So you know that our Stonewall Stunners are not completely far-fetched out there. For the last card, my Stonewall Stunner was that Frank Mir would announce his retirement after losing to Mark Hunt. So I knew that I got the part right that he would lose, but not the retirement bit, which I'm kind of glad of. You don't really want to be retiring guys. That's why it's the stunner. If it had actually been right, it would have been pretty shocking. Drew's was that James Tahuna would knock out Steve Bosse in under 45 seconds, I think. And Steve Bosse knocked out James Tahuna in like 53 seconds. So he almost got it right, just the wrong dude. So anyway, my Stonewall Stunner of this card, UFC Fight Night 86, will be that no heavyweight fight will end inside the first round. You've got Rothwell, Dos Santos. I mean, all of these definitely could. I mean, it's heavyweight MMA. But I have a feeling that some of these are going to last more than the first. I have a feeling that all of these could get out of the first round. A few of them I like to go to decision fight. And the Blades Ngannou fight could go pretty long if Blades is able to work his wrestling game. The one I guess that I'm most concerned about ending early would be Lewis Gonzaga. But I'll say it takes Gonzaga to the second round to get that submission. I think my official pick was first round, but for the sake of my Stonewall Stunner, I'll say no heavyweight fight ends inside the first round. So there you have it. Hope you guys enjoyed this edition of the Daily Fantasy Knockout Podcast. Hit us up on Twitter at Daily Fantasy KO. If you have questions about a particular fight, you can hit us up on Twitter or email us at fantasyknockout@gmail.com. We're a new podcast trying to grow our audience. So if you email us a question, we will answer you. Promise. You can also check us out on YouTube, where we are live streaming all of our breakdowns. We're going to be working on, hopefully, we wanted to do it over this kind of extended break, but it didn't happen, unfortunately. We want to kind of take these YouTube games and then go back and like edit them later and put up like graphics and then add music to the podcast. So those are things that we're working on. We hope that we can get in on future episodes. But if you enjoyed this breakdown, if you enjoy our work, comment and rate us on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, all that good stuff, our YouTube account, all that good stuff. So give us a follow on Twitter again at Daily Fantasy KO. For the absent Drew, I'm Josh. It's been fun. Peace out.